Assalamu alaikum. May peace and blessings be upon you. Welcome. My name is Katie Miranda El Ali, and I am here with my friend Mel Mason. Mel is the clutter expert, and we're going to talk a little bit about cluttering and decluttering. But what Mel realized after coming back from the brink of despair and getting through her own chaos was that the outside is just a mirror of the inside. And if you only address the outside without changing the inside, the clutter keeps coming back. So in this conversation, we are going to talk about life clutter and how Mel overcame that, overcoming a lot of really difficult situations and going on to thrive. This podcast is about inspiring and helping people who don't yet realize that even though they have been through painful times or experiences, that they can overcome those experiences and go on to get what they want in life. And Mel has done exactly that. I've known her since 2013 or something. We were in a business course together, and I have just seen such a dramatic change since when I met her versus now. So we're gonna definitely get into that. So Mel, do you want to introduce yourself, and we'll just jump right into it. Tell us about like one of your worst experiences in life. Are you overcoming that?
Oh, Katie. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. And yeah, we go back to 2014 working with Shanda. We did List Power first and then went into marketing mastery together, I think. So yeah, it's been a while. I'm glad we stayed connected, and I am definitely not the same person that I was there. But we'll touch on that issue, what that pain point was in a little bit later in this story. But the first thing that I think that I will share is that my background, what I talk about is that really the outside is a mirror of the inside. And for me, I was the cluttered, messy kid. You could not walk in my room. There were two paths in my room, one from the door to the desk and one from the door to my bed, but I was the only one who could navigate them. And the only time my room ever got cleaned was when my mom got pissed off enough that she would do something about it and she would clean my entire room. But what would inevitably happen? The clutter would just come right back. Yeah. It would just go right back to the way that it was. And I didn't realize at the time that the outside was just a mirror of the inside, because already at that point in my life, I was littered with clutter. There was a ton of loss and trauma, sexual abuse, emotional abuse. My parents divorced when I was 4, but really the breaking point or the dark night of my soul was basically when I lost my older brother to suicide. And I was 15 years old. He didn't even make it to his 21st birthday. But I was actually living with him at the time. I didn't want to stay with my mom. My parents had separated. I never wanted to live with my mom, so I was always trying to get out. So I was living with my brother, and it's very complicated. I've only shared this part of the story, I think, in one other interview, but this is what makes it really complicated, is that my brother was one of my sexual abusers, but I also idolized him, and I was living with him. And at that point in time, he was starting to get a guilty conscience and asked me if what he had done to me had affected me while I'm living with him. And just a little aside, I was absolutely terrified of him. He had rage. He would throw tables. I mean, I don't want to piss my brother off. I'm not going to say yes. I'm not about to piss you off. But an interesting series of events happened. My life has been divinely guided, and God has always been guiding my life. And I was actually at a friend's house her mom was helping me with study skills for school. They knew I was living with my brother, was having a hard time in school. So they invited me over to help me. And they just started asking all these weird questions, like, where are you sleeping? And all this stuff. And it got super, super uncomfortable. And when they dropped me off to go back home to live with him, back when they had payphones that were a quarter, they gave me a quarter to call them if I needed anything. And when they dropped me off at home, I went home. He wasn't there. I walked up to the center of town where he would hang out with his friends. And I just had this look of death, I think, on my face. And I walked up to him when I found him, and he's like, what's wrong? Or whatever he said, I don't remember. And I was just like, you know what you did affect me. And I had already called them. They were coming to pick me up in the center of town. I just walked up and used the payphone and called them. And he told me that he would have my stuff ready for me the next day. And when I went to pick up my stuff the next day is when I found him in his living room. He had taken his life. And in the same moment of finding him, his suicide note left all of his belongings to me. So the cluttered, messy kid who already had suffered a shit ton of trauma, now I inherit all of this. So it was pretty much the dark night of my soul. My life just spiraled out of control. I was a sopping maybe 115, 120 pounds, and I got kicked out of my sophomore year of high school for being a danger to myself and others. They said, you can't come back until you get intensive therapy. And what that looked like for a kid at 15 years old was going to spend the next year and a half of my life living in a residential treatment center for adolescents and living away from my friends, away from my family, away from my school, and actually living on this ground where the house was there and the school was there. So you didn't leave to go to school. You just walked up the hill to go to school. And while I was living there, though, something radically changed my life. I was introduced to yoga and mindfulness. And as a result of being introduced to yoga and mindfulness, I learned how to be present for all of that inner clutter that had accumulated, which was all the repressed emotions from the trauma and loss, the fears, the resentments, the limiting beliefs, the judgments, all of that stuff. I began to be able to be present for and witness and allow and no longer keep stuff down. And what started to happen as a result, totally unexpectedly, is this cluttered, messy kid who was completely fine living in a cluttered mess could no longer tolerate the clutter. And I spontaneously started to clean and clear my environment. I was creating the order outside of me that was getting created inside of me, because the outside is a mirror of the inside. And so it happened spontaneously and by accident. Like when I first launched my business, I'm like, organized by accident? That was kind of my tagline, because that's how it happened. I wasn't thinking, oh, I should really do something about this. I didn't care. I didn't even want to live, never mind get organized. I could care less. But as a result of just learning how to be present, I just spontaneously went from this cluttered, messy kid to someone who could no longer tolerate clutter. Now, just as a little aside, for those of you that have stuff that you hang on to, I didn't let go of all my attachments all at once. That happens gradually, but the outside had to have order and things had to have a place and they needed to be in their place.
For some reason, I want to ask you, what happened to your brother's stuff? Since this is about like...
Good question. That's a really good question. That's a really good question, because I often forget about that. But I was in a really dark place. And when I graduated from that treatment program, you go right kind of back to where you were before you entered into an institution when you become institutionalized. And I was already doing drugs before I went into the institution. So I just picked up right where I left off and I started doing crack cocaine. And I basically sold everything that I kept of his for drug money. And the interesting story is that I actually don't even have a photograph of him today. I got rid of everything. I have nothing. And I'm not so happy about the way that I let it go, but I can tell you I'm really grateful that I didn't lug all of that stuff around with me to hang on to his memory, because I don't need it. I have a connection with him. I don't need a picture. I don't need a thing to have that connection. It's not through the stuff. And so that was a really big lesson, is I don't need the stuff. I already have a connection. So yeah, I sold it all for drug money.
Okay. So I guess my question is, this is somebody that your own words were, I think you idolized him or worshiped him.
Idolized, yeah.
Idolized. And yet he was also your abuser. And then he committed suicide in the house that you were living in. How did you like put all those pieces together and move on from that? Like that just seems like really, I don't know, I can't even imagine.
It's been years of internal work. I mean, years and years committed to healing, because I knew that everything that I went through would somehow help others someday. So there was this motivation that it wasn't for nothing, because that's just not how God operates. And so knowing that it was to benefit others someday drove me to do the work, all the work of spending thousands on therapists and healers and, doing all of that work, doing the inner work, allowing all of that crap, all of the inner clutter to bubble to the surface so that it can be released instead of trying to keep it down, like keeping corks underwater. So knowing for sure that it was meant to help others was really what drove me to stay committed and actually do the work.
Okay, that's really fascinating, because what came to mind for me is the book Man's Search for Meaning. Did you read that book?
I have not read that book.
It's by Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor. He lost I believe his daughter and his wife at the very least, maybe other family members, but he was a psychologist who was in the concentration camps. And while he was there, he used his experience as a way to do psychological research into the people who were able to survive versus the people who gave up in life. And he found that it was the people who found meaning in their suffering, like you did. Your meaning was finding, how am I going to use this to help other people? And Viktor Frankl discovered that it was the people who found meaning to their experience who were the ones who survived. Yeah. So I just find that really interesting. And why don't you tell us like how you're helping people now, and how have you used this experience to go on and to help other people?
Yeah, so that journey of knowing that my experience was meant to help others took a very windy path. I never knew what it was going to look like. I just knew that I was going to be serving others somehow in my own business in some way, not knowing what that was going to look like. So at first I thought I was going to be an energy healer. So I took Reiki when I was 19. Then I thought I was going to be a yoga teacher. So I took yoga teacher training. Then I thought I was going to be a martial arts instructor. So I studied martial arts. Then it was more energy healing. And then I got to this point in my life where I had an opportunity to just take 6 months off and kind of figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I'm never going to grow up, but I did figure out what I wanted to be. And I was sitting there watching the show Hoarders for the very first time. And I was absolutely horrified, because they literally, basically all that stuff that a person surrounds themselves with is like their Great Wall of China. And so when you rip it all away in a short period of time, you've basically just left them completely exposed and raw, and you've re-traumatized them. So I was absolutely horrified watching the show. And with my background in energy healing, and at that point in my life, because of the work that I had done, I just love creating order out of chaos. It's just what I was good at. And I had this background in energy healing. I'm like, well, why don't I just start a business that helps people get to the root of the clutter so that it doesn't get like this in the first place, and also help them keep it from coming back? Because one of the key things that people often realize is that they'll clear a surface, or they'll organize their closet, or they'll be able to park the car back in the garage again. But in no time, the clutter comes right back, because the outside mirrors the inside.
And so what exactly do you do with your clients?
Ultimately, I teach them how to be present with themselves. That's all I teach them, because all clutter accumulates because of an unwillingness to look at it. It accumulates and you turn an eye, you refuse to look at it. We can only be in two states of being. We can be in a state of contraction, either avoiding what's uncomfortable or desperately hanging on to what feels good, or we can be in a state of allowing. That's it, 2 states. So I teach people to stop being contracted and start allowing. And when they start allowing, they start making space for the magic to happen. Like I have clients that just are spontaneously just decluttering their lives because they're doing this inner piece. It just has to come from the inside out.
And they're decluttering their lives both in terms of physical clutter, and then what other kinds of emotional clutter?
It affects every area of your life, because the inner clutter, which is repressed emotions from trauma and loss, resentments, fears, limiting beliefs, judgments, all of that stuff we accumulate through life. And it's like we're tapped in. We're born to be happy and abundant in every area of our lives. That's our birthright. It's our God-given right. It exists inside of us. Like, it's not coming from outside of us. We're born with it. But what starts to happen is all of this stuff we begin to accumulate, and we start to block off the flow of that abundance. We shrink it. We close it off. And when we stay in that state of contraction, we keep it blocked. But when we start to allow, we begin to acknowledge all of that inner clutter. And as you begin to acknowledge it and allow it, it releases and makes space on the inside. And as you make space on the inside, the outside has to match.
So do your clients, then they start with the inner work, and then that ends up manifesting in them getting rid of their clutter and their
and then it manifests, and then because all the clutter manifests, people hear the word clutter and they first think of the piles, but it also manifests as carrying excess weight. That's why dieting doesn't work. The pounds come right back because the inside hasn't changed. Addiction, needing to Botox, binging and purging, having too busy of a schedule, not having enough time. All of that stuff is manifestations of the same internal condition. So when you address the core, every area of your life gets better. You begin to make different food choices, different choices about what you consume with your mind. The people that you hang out with, you let go of toxic relationships that you stayed stuck in. It affects every area of your life, and you bring more abundance into your life because you open the flow. People get more money, they get better jobs, they get raises, they find checks. I got a $50,000 check in the mail. I mean, it's amazing.
Wow.
That's how I took the 6 months off. That's a whole other story.
How can I get a $50,000?
Well, that story, that $50,000 check comes as a result of the pain point of the other story we'll be talking about.
Okay, so should we get into the other story now? So this podcast is kind of I'm trying to show people that there are other people out there who've been through major problems, major obstacles, traumas, difficulties, and then they overcame that. So this other situation you overcame, sounds like the first one you turned into this like decluttering coaching business. And you want to tell us about the second one?
Yeah, absolutely. So this second one started when I was pretty newly sober off crystal meth. I was probably, I don't know, a year and a half, maybe 2 years sober, and met someone. I was completely codependent, married them, basically decided to shut my light down for someone else because it shined too bright for this person. And I stopped all practices. I stopped taking care of myself. I stopped making any space for myself, doing my own practice of being present. I stopped meditating. I stopped reading anything spiritual. I stopped connecting to God. I stopped all of it because I was too out there and my light shined too bright. So fast forward 6 years, I get to a point where I'm absolutely burned out, tapped out. It was a culmination of the person I was with had severe anxiety, insomnia for over a year, tried every medication known to man, not sleeping, and we lived in a studio, and the only door that closed was to the bathroom. So there was no place to go. If she was awake, I was awake. And then at the time, I was working at a job that I absolutely loved. I loved what I did, but the manager was just an a-hole. Like, he would just tear everything down. He was just, nothing was ever good enough. It was just such a horrible, negative environment to be in. And then I was also dealing with undiagnosed hemochromatosis at the time, which is an iron disorder where it's a gene disorder where basically the gene that tells your body to stop absorbing iron because you have enough doesn't work. So every bit of iron that I eat, my body consumes and absorbs. And so you don't really notice that usually till after menopause because it doesn't usually become an issue, but I was extremely fatigued. I was totally tapped out, burned out. So I had all of this going on, totally tapped out. And I just got to a point where I literally was standing there one day and I'm like, okay, I'm either going to end my life right now and be done with this because I just can't take it anymore, or I'm going to do whatever it takes to experience my birthright, which is to be happy and abundant in every area of my life. Obviously, I chose the latter. It took another hellish 6 years to get out of it, but I chose the latter. And what I did was I literally started with 5 minutes a day where I just started taking time for myself to be present with myself again. Only 5 minutes a day. Within 3 months, the source of my ex's anxiety was her mother's health. A situation evolved where we were able to move her in with us, and that calmed that situation down. So we started sleeping again. And then 3 months later, I'd always wanted to have my own business, be out doing my own thing. The first opportunity shows up to basically be a personal assistant to a couple of women who had more money than God, pretty much. And they hired me. I got a contract because I was leaving a really good, stable job with profit sharing and amazing benefits. And I got a contract for a year to work with them. I worked with them for 2 weeks. They're like, you know what? This just isn't working out right now. Bad timing, whatever. So we're just going to send you a check for the balance of your contract. So I worked for 2 weeks and then I received a $50,000 check in the mail. Wow. And then they got to say, then they said I got to keep the MacBook too. So I got to keep the $2,000 brand new MacBook Pro that they bought me to do the job with. So that's when I took the 6 months off to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up and launched Decluttering Space as my business. But it took another 6 years before I got out of that relationship because, you know, it takes what it takes. So finally start putting myself first and my happiness first and committing to that and dealing with all of the unraveling that needs to happen from the enmeshment and the unhealthiness of the whole relationship. It took another 6 years for it to finally come to an end. And it came to another really dark point where I was pretty much standing on the side of a really windy mountain road with a rock to my head, ready to smash my head in because she was trapping me in the car. And just, it was awful. Yeah, it just didn't end well. So you had to get out of there. But I finally got out of there. And once I let that toxic clutter go, that was 2 years ago, and my life has skyrocketed. Like when you let the stuff go, my life, it just has taken off.
I want to go back to that point on the road, and I want to know from you, what was it that prevented you from going through with killing yourself?
Because I know that I have a purpose that I have to do on this planet. Like I'm here.
Thank
God.
And
it's just that breaking point where I don't want to hurt someone else. So my first line is to go for myself. Like I'll hurt myself over someone else any day. So it's, you know, punch a wall or, you know, hurt myself in some way. Not, I mean, from all that stuff that happened, you know, growing up, from all that trauma, I was actually a cutter. I used to cut with razor blades. I mean, I've been through all of that, you know, so my first line is to take it out on myself, not on someone else. I'm going to lash out at myself first, not hurt you.
I see. So why don't you tell us now, like all the great things that have come into your life and all the opportunities. You're an author now.
So many. Well, funny full circle. So let me share the full circle. So my whole business started because of the show hoarders, seeing the show hoarders. And then when I left my ex, I got the opportunity to be an assistant organizer on the show hoarders. So I've actually been in an episode of Hoarders, season 11, the season finale. I think his name was John, but I've actually, so I was in the show Hoarders as an assistant organizer. So that happened. And then what happened after that? I mean, so much happened. I contributed to a book that became an international bestseller. So I became an international bestselling author. Then I was challenged by a coach to write a book. So I wrote my own book in 7 weeks. I didn't attempt to make that a bestseller. I don't like giving out clutter. So hilarious. I give it away for free. And then I've contributed to a bunch of other books that have become bestsellers. And then I was offered a TV show. So now I have my own TV show as well on Roku, Amazon, Google Play, Apple TV, and all that fun stuff. Yeah, it's kind of strange. Lots. And it just keeps getting better and better.
So can you tell us how people can find those books or watch your TV show? Like, what's the name of your book and the ones that you've contributed to?
Yeah, so Freedom from Clutter, the guaranteed foolproof step-by-step process to remove the stuff that's weighing you down, is the book that I wrote. You can get it for free at freegiftfrommel.com. You can download the whole thing for free. If you want to buy an autograph copy, you just go to declutteringspaces.com. That's my website. And there's a little tab that says products. You can buy the book and I'll actually autograph it and mail it to you if you're in the US. If you're outside the US, you just have to pay for shipping. I'll contact you if your order's outside the US. And to watch the TV show, all you actually need to do is just go to legrity.tv, which is LEGRITY.tv, and go under, I don't know, shows or producers or hosts or something, I forget. And then go into shows, all the shows come up, and then you'll see at the bottom the Mel Mason Show. And you just click that and all the episodes will come up. And I think there's already 5 uploaded, ready to go, all live right now. So it just launched in July.
That's awesome. So a couple of years ago, I saw some speech that you gave once. It was like on a stage somewhere at a festival outdoors. And
the Healthy Life Fest. Yep.
What?
The Healthy Life Fest. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. It was all about decluttering your house. And I actually started something. I was so inspired by what you were saying that I started a little decluttering group with my neighbors where we would once a week, and we would, just focus on a drawer or, like a coffee table and just declutter that.
Yep.
So I would really love it if you could share some of your wisdom about tackling some small area of your house so that it's not overwhelming to handle that clutter.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So first and foremost, you need to get present first. You don't want to be all scattered. So I teach my clients a process called allowing the now, which is simply just turning your attention inward and paying attention to your bodily sensations, your emotions, and your thoughts, and just being the observer and acknowledging them. It's just literally acknowledge, oh, my mind is racing. Oh, there's some sadness. Oh, whatever comes. Oh, there's a tingling sensation. Literally just unattached, non-judgmental, just witnessing and labeling so that it can go away. Spend a couple of minutes doing that just to get present, because all the clutter accumulates because you weren't present with it or weren't willing to be present with it. So we want to get you present first. Then you want to start small. Like, don't tackle the whole closet or the garage. I just say work with about a cubic foot of space at a time. You don't want to take on too much more than that because it gets overwhelming. But just start small. And then most people have the tendency to like dump it all out in a big pile in front of them and then start going through it. That's the one thing with Marie Kondo that I say no to. That just makes it more overwhelming for people. And it's just a really huge cluttered visual. So what I do is I have people sort into general categories first, like super general. I like to do it by room, whatever room something belongs into, just get it sorted out of the box or off the surface so it's out in an orderly fashion. And then the great part about that is once it's all separated like that, if you got tired, overwhelmed, something happened with the kids, you got interrupted, everything's already sorted in categories. So you could just contain those categories and put it away neatly and come back later instead of having to throw it all back in frustration, making it worse than what it was when you started. Then when you have all these categories in front of you, the other thing is don't make any decisions about what you're keeping and letting go during the sorting process. 2 decision-making processes, we don't want to combine them. You get decision fatigue. So save the decisions for later. The only exception is if it's trash, you can put it in the trash bin. You literally don't have to sort trash. Okay. So on that note, so you have them all in front of you. Start with whatever's easy for you to make decisions about first. Finishing one category at a time, what you're going to do is literally just take one item at a time. You're going to look at it. Am I keeping it or letting it go? Don't spend more than 5 seconds on it. It's not about what you keep or don't keep. It's about you building the muscle of letting go. So just if you don't let it go in 5 seconds, you're keeping it for now. No big deal, no judgment, just move on. Just do the same process over and over again until that category is done. Then move on to the next one until you finish them all. Once you're done, you'll be really surprised. You'll have released 30 to 60% on average without effort. Some people let it go of a lot more. Some people let go of less, but about 30 to 60% of it is going to shrink. So then you have all what you're keeping. Now you go put everything away. Once you get everything put away, then you finish up all the loose ends, which is taking out the trash, the recycle, shredding anything that needs to be shred. But most importantly, deal with the donations. Either get them scheduled to pick up, get them in the car, get them somewhere. If you're doing this like every day, I have a bag that goes in my closet. Once it's full, I take it, but the bag is out of sight so that I don't go back through it. So keep it somewhere out of sight. You can keep adding to it, but make sure you deal with it and get them ready to go or make a plan to get rid of them. And then once you deal with the physical, then it's just time to form the habit. Start making an appointment with yourself once or twice a week in your calendar, like you would to go see a doctor or get your hair cut, and keep your appointment with yourself. And if you don't keep your appointment with yourself, find someone that will be an accountability partner with you. And if that doesn't work, hire a coach.
What do you think about buying drawer organizers to help organize drawers, or is that just
It
more?
works. I mean, it works great, but don't buy the organizers before you do the purge. Everybody buys the containers before they go through this stuff. Oh, this will be great. Well, here's the thing. You don't even know what the heck you have. So how can you buy the containers for it? Because you're going to look at it and it's going to shrink by 30 to 60%. How many people, when they go buy a shoe rack, actually count how many pairs of shoes they have and they actually need the space for?
I did.
Okay, you're an exception. Most people don't. But the majority of the listeners do not. They just, oh, this shoe looks great. And then they go put it out and they're like, well, that doesn't fit my shoes. I still got 20 more pairs. So don't put the cart before the horse. You don't want to get the containers and the organizers first. Get rid of what you're not keeping so you see what you have. Once you see what you have, then you figure out how does it make sense for you to store it. Do you need containers? Do you need organizers? Do you want it to look pretty? I've literally worked with one client that like wanted her pantry to have all these same slide out nice little trays. But for the most part, you don't need much. You have everything you need already in your stuff. You don't, I've never really had clients need to buy something unless it was like a really special piece of furniture they wanted, because they made the space for it. Like I had a client get a little apothecary chest, gorgeous, just those little square drawers. But she was so excited to make the space for it. It was like a huge, like that's like 1 in a million of my clients, have wanted a special piece of furniture. So get rid of the stuff that you don't need first, then see how you want to, then think about how does it make sense for you to organize it. So when you go to use it, it's easy and you want to put it back.
Okay. I think I went and I did it backwards. I went out and I bought some IKEA drawer organizers and I organized stuff, but I did it.
Oh yeah, so you just buy the containers and throw the stuff in. You don't look at it and make the decisions, right?
No, I did. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I did.
Most people will just buy the organizers for the stuff. They want to avoid the whole letting go part, the decision-making process. They just, let me buy these containers to contain the mess and put it away. So it's contained. Containment is great. I totally, fully support containment, but you still have to go through those containers and look at every item because you didn't look at every item as it accumulated. So no matter what, you still have to do the work. There's no pussyfooting around it. Like it's not for the faint of heart. Okay. You have to do the work. It has not been an easy journey. So I commend you for starting.
So I have I guess a bit of a philosophical question now. If we look at how much stuff we have now in 2021 compared to how much stuff our grandparents had, what do you think that says about our society?
We're more traumatized. We're more traumatized and we're more stressed. We just have way more inner clutter.
Or do you think it has to do with living in a capitalistic society where people are always buying new stuff and collecting new stuff?
That comes from this inner clutter. All of that comes from the inside.
Okay.
The outside only matches the inside.
Uh-huh. Yeah, because I think about how much stuff I have, and I have always been the type of person who's constantly getting rid of stuff, because up until I was 38, between 18 and 38, I moved every 2 years approximately. Mm-hmm. And I still have this inner feeling that like I can't keep accumulating stuff because what if I have to move, Yeah,
and we're always accumulating. That's what people don't realize. It's like we live in a world where we're constantly accumulating, whether you're buying new clothes, going to the grocery store, getting mail. If you have kids, the influx of paper that comes in just from kids being in school and dealing with their artwork and what art you're going to put up on the walls this month and all of that. I mean, we are always accumulating. So you need to always be purging. Yeah. You just need to do it. It just needs to become part of your daily life. And when you clear up the crap on the inside, when you clear the clutter on the inside, what starts to happen is you can't tolerate the clutter anymore. You need to have clear, clean space. The more space you have inside, the more space you need to have outside. Like I have drawers that are empty, and there's certain people that I'll tell that to, and they're like, what do you mean you have an empty drawer? Why? Like, why? It's supposed to be full, right? Like, no, like you can have empty, clear space. It's okay. I get excited when I open a drawer and it's empty. I'm like, yes. But that terrifies people. I mean, clean, clear space will terrify you if you haven't dealt with the clutter inside. I worked with a woman who, stuff everywhere, trash all over the place. There was this wall of shoe boxes on the floor, like a 5-foot section, had been there for years. She wanted my help to go through those boxes. We went through those boxes, and when I left the floor, there was 5 feet of clear space on the floor. She disappeared off the face of the earth for like a month and didn't call me because she couldn't handle the clear space.
Wow. So did you come back and help her again?
Yeah, but she wasn't willing to do the inner piece. When I first started, I went into people's homes and attempted to get them to do the inner piece as well, but they wouldn't. So now I refuse to go to your home unless you do this inner piece and you coach with me. You can't get me in your home because it's just a disservice. If you're not doing this inner piece, it's just putting a Band-Aid on the problem, and it's just going to come back. You're going to pay thousands and thousands and thousands to an organizer to help you keep order in your stuff, and it's just going to come back. Or you can pay a coach and clear it for once and for all and be done with it.
So do you work with people all over the world now, since you're not only going into, okay.
Yep. It's all via phone. Anywhere the phone will travel, I can work.
And
it's all via phone.
If people want to work with you or learn more about what you do or watch some of your videos, how can they find you?
Yeah, decluttering-spaces.com is my website. There's a little contact me that pops up. I am launching a group program in November. If you're interested in joining a group, it's called what is it? What did I call it? Complete Clutter Mastery. I had to remember what I actually called it because it's not launching till November. So Complete Clutter Mastery is launching in November. If you're interested, you can just email me at that pop-out form, the contact form, or you can just email me your questions. If you download my book at freegiftfrommel.com, you get put into my email list. You get notified of all the things that I have going on. Like I do challenges and workshops and summits all the time. So if you're on my list, you get updated with that, and they're always free. So you can come attend any of that stuff. And then I have a YouTube channel. I think you just Google Mel Mason Decluttering Spaces, and my YouTube channel comes up. Tons of great content on there as well.
Cool. And what do you...
And you can watch the TV show on Legrity.tv, Legrity.tv. I forget that I have a TV show that I'm supposed to promote.
So
that's a cruel joke from God that I have a TV show. That's hilarious because I don't own a TV or watch TV. So me having a TV show.
I don't own a TV either.
I literally, like, when it landed in my lap, was like, are you kidding me? Really? This is what we're doing? Okay. I just suit up and show up. It's not what I asked for. My vision's much smaller than his. That's why he's in charge, not me.
One final question or piece of advice you could share, like if there is somebody out there who is in a stuck situation and struggling with trying to get themselves out of that situation, whether it's a job they don't like or a relationship or, just stuck somehow, like what is your advice?
Well, number one, you are absolutely necessary. You are a unique piece to the puzzle, and we need you, but that means you need to do your work. It's not for the faint of heart, but you need to do your work. We have to clear our own inner clutter. If we want peace on earth, we have to be at peace within ourselves. So if you're not at peace within yourself, you can't have peace on earth. So we have to clear everything in ourselves in order to have the world that we want. So my wish for everyone is to do their own work so that we can have peace on earth. Just be willing to be present with your own experience and stop running away from yourself. Just be willing to sit with yourself and allow whatever is to be. Just be with whatever shows up. When I was going through my divorce, what was going on was waves and waves of grief for months, and then it passed. But I allowed all of it. And because I allowed all of it, it didn't keep me down. Like, I'm back, it was a year and a half of hell, but, it was because I allowed the whole process to happen and be present with it, that it didn't get stuck. And so the most important gift, the best gift you can give to yourself is your presence. Your presence is required.
Cool. Well, thanks so much, Mel. It's so great to hear how well you're doing these days. Like you look so much different from when I last. Yeah, like so much different. Yeah.
Yes, so very, very different. Yeah, it's like 170 pounds the last time you saw me.
Really?
Almost 170, yeah, back then. Yeah, that was at my heaviest in that relationship. Now I'm about 120.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you really are practicing what you preach.
I practice it every day. I do 15 minutes a day. That's all I ask of my clients. Start with 5 minutes, make your way to 15 minutes, and however long it takes you to get there. It took me years. I literally just do 15 minutes a day, and my life just keeps getting better and better and better. More and more amazing stuff just keeps happening. The more and more I remove the interference, the more God can flow through, and the more abundance I receive. Awesome. But you can't receive if your hands are closed.
Yeah.
Just thought,
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Mel, for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.